The discovery in the walls. James Harrison brushed dust from his sleeve as he studied the elaborate Victorian molding above him. The Blackwood estate had stood proudly on this hillside for over 2 centuries, and now its restoration rested in his hands. As an architectural preservationist, he'd recovered countless historical treasures, but something about this project felt different. "What secrets are you hiding?" he murmured, running his fingers along the weathered wallpaper. The house seemed to answer with a subtle creak, drawing his attention to a peculiar seam in the library wall. James had reviewed the original blueprints extensively, and this section didn't match any of the documented renovations. Setting up his equipment, he began carefully removing layers of wallpaper. The first surprise came when his thermal scanner detected an unusual cold spot. The second was the faint blue glow that emerged as he peeled away decades of paper and paint. "That's definitely not original to the house," he muttered, reaching for his phone to document the discovery. The device died instantly, screen flickering out with a soft buzz. James frowned, checking his backup camera only to find it similarly unresponsive. Every piece of electronic equipment he carried went dark within moments of approaching the wall. Following preservation protocols would mean calling in a team, filing reports, waiting for permits. But something in James's gut told him this discovery couldn't wait. With careful precision, he began removing the surrounding plaster, revealing what appeared to be a doorway of impossible design. The material wasn't any metal he recognized, it seemed to shift colors when viewed from different angles, like oil on water. The surface was cool to the touch and hummed with a barely perceptible vibration. As James traced the edge of the frame, script-like markings illuminated beneath his fingers. The symbols were unlike anything he'd ever encountered in his studies of historical architecture. "This is way above my pay grade," he whispered, but couldn't bring himself to step away. The mystery before him defied everything he knew about the house's history, about architecture, about what should be possible. A soft click echoed through the library as the last symbol lit up. The doorway split down the middle with a gentle hiss, revealing a chamber that by all rights shouldn't exist within the house's dimensions. James's preservation instincts warred with his curiosity as cool mist spilled out across his boots. The chamber's interior glowed with the same ethereal blue light he'd first glimpsed through the wall. At its center stood what could only be described as a stasis pod, though James's mind rebelled at using such a sci-fi term in his carefully documented restoration project. Inside the crystalline structure, a figure floated in suspended animation. James approached cautiously, his breath catching as he made out more details. The being appeared humanoid but was clearly not human, their skin held a subtle iridescence, and delicate patterns swirled across their surface like living tattoos. As he drew closer, the pod's surface began to dissolve like morning frost in sunlight. The figure's eyes opened, revealing pupils that shifted like kaleidoscopes. James stumbled backward, his professional composure forgotten as the being gracefully emerged from stasis. "Your architectural preservation techniques are remarkably inefficient," they stated in a voice that somehow reminded James of wind chimes. "Though I suppose that's to be expected given your species' limited understanding of quantum engineering." James opened and closed his mouth several times before finding his voice. What are you?" "My designation is Neria, Observer Class 3, they replied, examining the room with evident curiosity. "Though I believe proper human etiquette requires me to ask your designation in return." "James Harrison," he managed. "I'm the lead architect on the Blackwood Estate Restoration Project." "Ah, a curator of historical structures. How fitting." Neria's attention turned to the thermal scanner lying dead on the floor. "Your tools are quite primitive, but I sense an appreciation for preservation we might share." Before James could respond, car doors slammed outside the estate. Voices approached, accompanied by the distinct sound of military boots on gravel. Neria's expression shifted to one of concern. "It seems my emergence has drawn more attention than anticipated," they said. "Tell me, James Harrison, how do you feel about becoming part of a much larger preservation project?" One that might redefine everything you think you know about history, both yours and mine. As flashlight beams cut through the library windows, James made a decision that would forever alter both their worlds. I think, he said carefully, that some discoveries are worth protecting, no matter what century they're from. A hint of a smile played across Neria's otherworldly features. I was hoping you'd say that. Whispers across stars. Your cardiovascular system seems remarkably unstable, Neria observed as they crouched in the estate's wine cellar. Above them, boots thundered across hardwood floors. Is this typical for humans under stress? James pressed his back against the cool stone wall, trying to steady his breathing. Most humans don't typically hide from government agents with an alien they just found in their restoration project. Technically, I found you, Neria corrected, their iridescent skin dimming to match the cellar's shadows. I selected this location centuries ago precisely because humans would eventually attempt to preserve it. Though I must admit, I didn't expect my observer pod to malfunction and extend my stasis quite so long. The sound of doors being kicked open grew closer. James ran his fingers through dust-covered hair, mind racing. So you've been here since 1783, Neria supplied. Shortly after construction began on this estate. My mission was to observe your species' architectural evolution as a reflection of societal development. They tilted their head, studying James with those mesmerizing kaleidoscope eyes. Your preservation instincts are particularly intriguing. Most species simply destroy and rebuild. Speaking of preservation, James whispered as footsteps approached the cellar door, please tell me you have some kind of plan beyond hiding among the Merlot. Neria's patterns swirled with what might have been amusement. Of course. Though you may find it somewhat unconventional. They reached out, pressing cool fingers against James's temple. Try not to resist. Quantum displacement can be disorienting the first time. The world shifted sideways. Colors inverted, sound became texture, and for a brief moment James felt like he was experiencing time from all angles simultaneously. When reality reasserted itself, they were standing in what appeared to be his apartment, except everything was slightly wrong. The furniture cast shadows in impossible directions, and through the windows, he could see the city skyline flickering like a mirage. Welcome to what your physics would call a quantum pocket dimension, Neria announced, their patterns glowing brighter in this strange space. A temporary fold in reality where we can regroup and plan our next move. James stumbled to his couch, which felt simultaneously solid and ephemeral. This is impossible. Only from a three-dimensional perspective. Neria perched beside him with inhuman grace. Your species' grasp of quantum mechanics is still quite primitive, though your intuitive understanding of preservation is remarkable. It's one of the reasons I chose this time period to re-emerge. You chose. James shook his head, trying to process. You're saying your stasis pod didn't malfunction. You waited specifically for someone like me to find you. Someone with both the skills to recognize historical significance and the instinct to protect it, yes. Neria's patterns shifted into more complex configurations. My original mission was simply to observe, but during my stasis, I discovered something far more significant. Something that affects both our species. James found himself drawn into those kaleidoscope eyes, seeing fragments of impossible knowledge spinning within. What did you find? Evidence that your world and mine have intersected before, long ago. The Blackwood estate wasn't just built over my observation post, it was constructed using principles of quantum architecture that shouldn't have been possible in the 18th century. Neria's voice took on an urgent tone. Someone gave your ancestors knowledge they weren't ready for, James. Knowledge that could be devastating in the wrong hands. And now those wrong hands are tearing apart my restoration project looking for you. James ran his fingers along the strange shadows cast by his coffee table. Why tell me this? Why trust me? Neria's patterns pulsed with something that might have been vulnerability. Because in 3 centuries of observation, I've never encountered a human who looked at an impossible discovery and thought first of preserving it rather than exploiting it. Your entire career is built around protecting history, even when you don't fully understand its significance. Pretty sure architectural preservation didn't cover quantum physics and alien conspiracies in grad school, James muttered, but he couldn't help feeling oddly flattered. Then consider this an opportunity for continuing education. Nerea stood, offering their hand. Their skin shimmered with rippling patterns that seemed to reach out toward James. I need your help to protect both our histories, and in return, I can show you wonders your preservation society never dreamed of. What do you say, James Harrison? Ready to expand your restoration expertise into new dimensions? James looked at that offered hand, remembering every time he'd fought to save a historical site from demolition, every battle to preserve the past for future generations. This was so far beyond crumbling Victorian mansions and endangered Art Deco facades, but the core principle remained the same: protecting history, preserving knowledge, keeping the past alive to inform the future. He took Nerea's hand, feeling a slight electric tingle where their skin met. I always wanted to branch out into more experimental preservation techniques. Nerea's laugh sounded like crystal wind chimes in a quantum breeze. Trust me, James. After this, you'll never look at architecture the same way again. As if to emphasize their point, the apartment around them began to shift and fold, reality rearranging itself like an impossible origami. James tightened his grip on Nerea's hand as the world transformed, wondering what other architectural impossibilities awaited in the space between dimensions. He had a feeling this particular restoration project was about to become the most important preservation work in human history, assuming they survived long enough to document it properly. Echoes of tomorrow. Your quantum architecture is leaking, James observed, watching reality ripple around a seemingly ordinary brownstone building. After 2 weeks of dimensional hopping with Nerea, he was getting better at spotting the signs: shadows that moved against light sources, angles that didn't quite add up, and the subtle vibration in the air that made his teeth ache. Nerea's patterns swirled with concern as they studied the building. This shouldn't be possible. The quantum foundations I observed in the 18th century were isolated incidents. But this. They gestured at the temporal distortions warping the street. This is recent construction. Someone's been busy while you were in stasis. James pulled out his preservation notebook, making sketches of the impossible angles. Old habits died hard, even when documenting quantum anomalies. Think it's connected to whoever gave my ancestors that advanced knowledge. The resonance patterns are similar. Nerea moved closer to him, their shoulder brushing his as they peered at his drawings. The contact sent pleasant shivers down his spine, another sensation he was getting used to. Your architectural documentation skills are surprisingly useful for mapping quantum distortions. Thanks, I think. James found himself increasingly distracted by their proximity, the way Nerea's iridescent skin seemed to pulse in harmony with his heartbeat. Though I'm pretty sure the Preservation Society would have questions about my latest project notes. Your species does seem remarkably fond of bureaucratic documentation. Nerea's patterns formed what he now recognized as their version of a smile. Though your personal observation techniques are quite thorough. James felt heat rise in his cheeks, remembering how intently they'd been studying each other during their dimensional travels. What had started as professional curiosity had evolved into something far more complex and intimate. Speaking of observations. A black SUV turning onto the street cut off his response. Government agents, Nerea confirmed, their patterns shifting to alert mode. And they're getting better at tracking quantum signatures. We need to move. Before James could suggest retreating to their pocket dimension, the brownstone's front door burst open. A figure in a hazmat suit emerged, carrying what looked like a miniature version of Nerea's stasis pod. The air around them crackled with temporal energy. They're extracting quantum technology, Nerea's voice held an edge of fear James had never heard before. If they activate it without proper containment. The hazmat figure fumbled with the pod. Reality shuddered. James felt his bones vibrate as multiple timelines threatened to intersect. "Oh hell no," he muttered, preservation instincts kicking in. "They're going to damage the entire temporal structure of the building." Without thinking, he sprinted forward. "James, wait!" Neria called out, but he was already moving. Years of restoration work had taught him how to stabilize failing structures. This was just a more exotic application of those skills. He reached the hazmat figure just as they lost their grip on the pod. Time seemed to slow as James dove, catching the ancient technology before it could shatter against the quantum-infused pavement. The impact sent him rolling, cradling the pod like a preservation specialist protecting a priceless artifact, which, he supposed, it was. Reality snapped back into focus. The hazmat figure stood frozen. The government SUV screeched to a halt. And Neria. Neria moved like liquid light, their patterns a blur of protective fury as they placed themselves between James and the approaching agents. "Your quantum preservation instincts are either incredible or incredibly reckless," they said without taking their kaleidoscope eyes off the threats surrounding them. "Possibly both." "Just doing my job," James grunted, carefully standing with the pod. "Protecting historical artifacts, preserving important structures, preventing temporal collapse. You know, typical restoration work." "Your definition of typical has expanded considerably." Neria's patterns rippled with what might have been affection. "Though I must admit, watching you apply preservation principles to quantum physics is fascinating." The hazmat figure took a step forward. "Hand over the artifact and the alien entity. This is a matter of national security." James felt Neria tense beside him. The pod in his arms hummed with dangerous energy. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter not just history, but the very fabric of reality itself. "Sorry," he said, reaching for Neria's hand. "But this particular historical discovery is already under professional preservation protection." Their fingers intertwined, sending sparks of quantum energy racing up his arm. James saw Neria's patterns shift into what he now recognized as their equivalent of a surprised smile. "Ready to try something incredibly reckless?" they asked, their free hand tracing symbols in the air. "More reckless than catching quantum technology in midair?" "Much more." Neria pulled him closer, their forehead touching his. "How do you feel about rewriting architectural history across multiple dimensions?" The agents were raising weapons. The hazmat figure was reaching for them. But all James could focus on was the way Neria's patterns seemed to reach out and merge with his own racing pulse. "As long as we maintain proper preservation protocols," he said, earning a crystalline laugh that made reality shimmer around them. "Oh, James Harrison," Neria whispered as the world began to fold in impossible ways. "You're going to help me preserve so much more than just history." The quantum pod pulsed between them as dimensions shifted and merged. James held tight to Neria's hand, realizing that somewhere between discovering an alien in his restoration project and preventing temporal collapse, he'd fallen for someone who existed in more dimensions than he could comprehend. And somehow, that felt like the most natural preservation project of all. "Between two worlds. Your quantum signature is changing," Neria observed, their patterns rippling with concern as they studied James in their hidden sanctuary between dimensions. "The prolonged exposure to quantum fields is affecting your molecular structure." James looked down at his hands, watching the faint iridescence that had begun to shimmer beneath his skin. After a month of dimension hopping and quantum preservation work, he was starting to resemble Neria in subtle ways. "Is that dangerous?" "Not exactly." Neria's fingers traced the patterns forming on his forearm, sending pleasant shivers through multiple dimensions. "You're adapting. Evolving. Just as I've been, changing through my connection with you." It was true. Neria's originally precise, mechanical movements had become more fluid, more human. Their emotional patterns displayed depths that they claimed were previously unknown to their species. They were changing each other in fundamental ways. The quantum pod we recovered is deteriorating, James said, changing the subject before the intensity of their connection overwhelmed him. He gestured to the ancient technology they'd rescued, now safely stored in their pocket dimension. Whatever they were trying to extract from it is becoming unstable. Neria's patterns darkened with worry. The knowledge it contains. James, I haven't been entirely honest about my mission here. You mean besides being an architectural observer? He smiled, trying to lighten their mood. The way their patterns responded to his humor made his heart race in impossible geometries. My people didn't just observe yours. Neria moved to the pod, their fingers dancing across its surface. We were searching for something. A capability unique to humans that we believed could save our civilization. What capability? Your ability to preserve while adapting. To hold on to history while embracing change. Neria's patterns swirled with complex emotions. My people became so focused on preservation that we stopped evolving. We maintained perfect stasis while the universe changed around us. But humans, you build new wonders while protecting the old. You grow without losing your past. James approached them, drawn by the vulnerability in their quantum frequencies. And now? Now I understand what we were really looking for. Neria turned to face him, their kaleidoscope eyes reflecting infinite possibilities. It was never about the technology or the architecture. It was about connection. About learning to change without losing ourselves. The pod pulsed between them, its quantum field harmonizing with their combined energy. James felt reality flex and shift around them as their frequencies aligned. The government team's hunting us, he said carefully, they don't just want the pod's technology, do they? No. Neria's patterns rippled with determination. They want what's happening between us. The proof that humans can adapt to quantum existence while maintaining their essential nature. They want to weaponize it. Of course they do. James sighed, running a hand through his increasingly iridescent hair. Humans do have a habit of turning discoveries into weapons. It's why preservation work is so important. Neria's patterns brightened suddenly. That's it. James, your preservation principles, they're not just about maintaining physical structures. They're about protecting the meaning, the purpose behind them. They began pacing, their excitement causing reality to shimmer around them. The pod's technology is failing because it was never meant to be extracted or weaponized. It was meant to facilitate connection, understanding, evolution. Like what's happening to us. James caught their hand, feeling quantum energy surge between them. Exactly. Neria's patterns merged with the developing iridescence under his skin. We're not just preserving history anymore, James. We're creating it. A new kind of quantum architecture built on the foundation of both our species. The pod's pulse quickened, matching the rhythm of their combined energy. Outside their dimensional pocket, James could sense multiple realities pressing closer, drawn by the power of their connection. They're coming, he said, feeling temporal distortions ripple across nearby dimensions. Multiple teams, multiple timelines. They're learning to track us. Neria squeezed his hand, their touch sending cascades of quantum possibility through his evolving consciousness. Then perhaps it's time to stop hiding. Time to show them what true preservation looks like. You mean reveal ourselves? Risk everything we've been protecting? No. Neria's patterns formed complex equations in the air around them. I mean show them what happens when preservation and evolution work in harmony. When past and future, human and quantum, find ways to coexist. The pod began to resonate with their combined frequency, its ancient technology responding to something new, something that was neither purely human nor purely quantum, but a preservation of both. You realize this could change everything, James said, even as he felt his consciousness expanding into new dimensions. Rewrite the relationship between our species, our understanding of reality itself. Neria's laugh echoed through multiple planes of existence. Isn't that what the best preservation projects do? Honor the past while building the future. As government agents closed in across dimensions, as reality itself seemed to hold its breath, James pulled Neria closer. Their patterns merged, human preservation instincts harmonizing with quantum evolution in ways neither of their species had imagined possible. Well, he said, feeling their combined energy begin to transform the very fabric of spacetime, I always did want my restoration work to make history. The pod's pulse reached crescendo as their frequencies synchronized perfectly. Around them, dimensions began to shift and merge, creating something entirely new, a quantum architecture built on the foundation of human heart and alien wisdom. The future, it seemed, would require preserving more than just buildings. The choice. Reality shimmered like heat waves across multiple dimensions as James and Neria stood at the center of converging timelines. The quantum pod pulsed between them, its ancient technology resonating with their combined energy. Through his evolved senses, James could feel government teams approaching from every direction, across time, space, and quantum possibilities. They've surrounded us, he observed, his iridescent skin glowing in harmony with Neria's patterns. Every dimension, every timeline. Not surrounded, Neria corrected, their kaleidoscope eyes scanning quantum frequencies. They've given us exactly what we need, audience and amplification. James felt their plan crystallize across shared consciousness. You want to use their containment attempt to demonstrate true preservation. Neria's patterns swirled with pride and affection. Your human instincts are adapting beautifully to quantum thinking. Around them, the pocket dimension began to pulse with accumulated power. James could sense the quantum architecture they'd created together, a framework of possibility built from his preservation principles and Neria's evolutionary understanding. It was nothing like the weapon their pursuers hoped to create. It was something far more profound. Last chance to reconsider, he said, even as their energies intertwined more deeply. Once we do this, there's no going back. No preserving the old boundaries between our species. Neria's laugh rippled through multiple frequencies. My dear James, isn't that exactly what the best preservation work does? Find ways to bridge past and future, different yet compatible forms of existence. The first temporal breach appeared as government forces began their assault. Reality cracked along quantum fault lines, admitting teams of agents in advanced containment gear. Their weapons hummed with stolen quantum technology. Surrender the alien entity in the quantum artifact, a voice commanded across multiple dimensions. This is your final warning. James felt Neria's patterns shift into something both ancient and entirely new. Their fingers interlaced, sending cascades of energy through evolving quantum architecture. You misunderstand, Neria addressed their would-be captors. We're not here to surrender. We're here to preserve. The pods pulsed synchronized with their combined frequency. James channeled years of preservation experience through quantum awareness, feeling the structure of reality respond to their touch. Around them, the pocket dimension began to transform. What you sought to weaponize, he explained, watching understanding dawn across multiple timelines, was never about power or control. It was about connection. Evolution. The ability to grow while honoring what came before. Temporal energy swirled around them as the quantum architecture activated. Agents raised weapons, but found themselves caught in the resonance of something far more powerful than force, the harmony of preservation and progress, human and quantum, past and future working in perfect balance. Your containment fields are part of our demonstration, Neria announced, their patterns merging with James's increasingly quantum consciousness. Watch closely. This is how true preservation works. Together, they released the energy they'd been gathering. The pod's ancient technology amplified their connection, sending waves of quantum revelation through every timeline. James felt their message ripple across dimensions, not in words, but in pure understanding. They showed the beauty of quantum architecture built on human preservation principles. The power of evolution guided by respect for history. The infinite possibilities that opened when different forms of existence learned to grow together rather than fight for dominance. Through their combined consciousness, James and Nerea offered a choice, not surrender, but synthesis. Not weapons, but wisdom. Not control, but connection. The quantum field around them stabilized into something entirely new. Where there had been barriers between dimensions, now there were bridges. Where there had been fear of the unknown, now there was fascination with possibility. The very fabric of reality had been preserved and transformed, just as they had been transformed by each other. The pod's empty, one of the agents reported with surprise, lowering their weapon. The ancient technology had dissolved, its purpose fulfilled in the creation of something far greater. Not empty, Nerea corrected, their patterns rippling with joy. Evolved. As all well-preserved things must. James felt the last pieces of their quantum architecture lock into place, a framework for future cooperation between their species, built on the foundation of their unique connection. I don't think the Preservation Society has guidelines for this level of restoration work. Then we'll write new ones. Nerea's consciousness brushed his with infinite tenderness. After all, isn't that what we've been doing all along? Finding ways to preserve the essential while embracing change. Around them, reality settled into its new configuration. Government teams stood down as understanding spread through quantum frequencies. The architecture James and Nerea had created together would ensure that neither species could exploit the other, only grow together, guided by the principles of preservation and evolution they discovered. So, James said, watching their combined iridescence paint impossible colors across dimensions, what happens now? Nerea's patterns formed what he recognized as their most human smile yet. Now, my quantum preservationist, we continue our work. There are infinite histories to protect, infinite futures to build, and infinite ways for two species to learn from each other. Together, he asked, feeling their frequencies harmonize across all possible timelines. Together, Nerea confirmed as reality shimmered with new potential. After all, the best preservation projects are never really finished, they just keep evolving. And in that moment, between quantum and human, past and future, preservation and progress, they began writing the next chapter of both their species' history, together.